thank you so much for coming back. It's me, Jill. I am reading from my book, Free Will, my memoir. Um, when we left off on the last chapters, we had found out that me and my then husband were going to get back together again. And I had truly finally decided I was no longer going to be a Jehovah's Witness. So the next couple chapters are going to kind of explain how I explored what the world outside of the church was like. So we're going to be starting on chapter 33. If you're returning, thank you so much for being here. Welcome back. And if you're new, please check out my channel. Click on my profile button there and click on videos. You can look at any of the previous videos if you want to start at the beginning of the book and catch up. Welcome. Okay, chapter 33. During this revival period, my husband and I now had the common ground of leaving the church. During this phase, I had indeed finally and firmly decided that I didn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness. I didn't want to be in the Jehovah's Witness organization anymore. But now I had the time and the inclination to do a little research from outside the organization. This is when I joined an online forum with other ex-JWs about mutually shared experiences. I learned of books written by former Jehovah's Witnesses. I read and had my mind blown every step of the way. Everything I read and researched unveiled to me how right I was to leave this organization. I do not write my story with the goal of demonizing the religion I was raised in. I do not take it as my purpose to expose or unveil what this church is really all about. This has been done already by a lot of people. If you type in Jehovah's Witnesses on Google or YouTube, you'll uncover many dark realities of this church that have been exposed by individuals, by news outlets, and even by legal courts around the world. As much as I don't want to take on the task of bearing all the church's flaws, I knew when I wrote my story that I had to be frank about my experience in the church. I will no longer ignore what I know to be wrong. I will not be intimidated into being silent about what I find to have been destructive to people I love and people I have met around the globe whose families have been torn apart by Jehovah's Witnesses policies. I do know the organization is nothing I ever want to be remotely associated with. For me, it is not true, nor is it clean or pure. In my opinion, it is a deeply flawed cult that destroys people's lives in several ways. I cannot speak to everything that I feel about this in this book, for this is my story and not the story of this church. But my heart continues to go out to the thousands upon thousands of people who have lost children, parents, grandparents, grandchildren, siblings, and friends at the hands of this church's policies. Not to mention other atrocities facilitated by the organization's ridiculous rules. Knowing the truth about this organization was crushing, for I had given it 46 years of my life. The way to survival for me was to process it one step at a time. My process began with anger. It was step one. I was angry that I was taught this religious dogma from before I could even speak or walk. I was angry that I was told I had a choice, but was intimidated by fear of God and death and the disappointment of those I love, not to question it. I was angry at myself for being stupid enough not to wake up from this religious coma till I was 46 years old. I was angry at the shunning policy. I was angry at the organization and angry at the people that follow the faith. But I knew the anger couldn't or wouldn't go on forever. Sadness started to creep in with time. I cried over the loss of my friends. I cried over the distance that crept in between me and my mom. I ached over the losses that my children were experiencing. This monumental, unparalleled loss. This was monumental, unparalleled loss. Almost everyone we loved was gone from our lives in an instant. Almost everyone who loved us now no longer spoke to us or acknowledged us. It was brutally painful for me personally, but as I watched it through the eyes of my children, sorrow speared through me like a serrated knife. This sad period of mourning, mutilating, soul-crushing agony got worse and came back over and over. It was amplified with each life-altering experience that ended up coming my way. It is almost impossible to articulate to anyone who has never experienced being completely shunned and rejected by almost everyone you've ever cared about, by almost everyone who ever loved you. It starts so subtly. You notice, but you're busy getting on with your new life. Then month after month, year after year, you find that rejection is now intrinsic with who you are. Intellectually, you know that those that are shunning you, rejecting you as a person, are doing so because of their conviction to this church and their perceived loyalty to their God. But emotionally, psychologically, it smashes your heart, your self-regard. It erodes the confidence in who you are and what your value as a person is. It feeds each and every insecurity you've ever had a hint of, and self-hatred and doubt ache to take over. Eventually, I would become aware of the need to fight off sadness, not to give in to the pulling sensation of sorrow and victimhood. In times when sadness receded, motivation would gently spring up. I felt motivated to write my story and to sort out my process through it. Part of that process was writing down my feelings. As I wrote, I felt an impulse to share my story with others. Writing this book was a choice, but more than that, I felt pushed and prodded into writing it by my own intuition. Throughout my journey, I have learned that intuition is a beautiful thing that each of us possess. My intuition was nudging me continually to share the experience of my existence. Listening to the voice inside me was new. I began to trust myself, my inner voice, my intuition. And that was not easy, given that intuition was not something ever spoken of in my religious discipline. We were not allotted the luxury of thinking for ourselves or trusting our gut. All credit was given to God for everything. Any wisdom, motivation, or reason for doing anything had to come from God. This might sound magnanimous or humble, meek, respectful, which are all highly esteemed virtues in the Bible. I agree that one does benefit by not being self-centered and egocentric, but there is confusion for many of us taught constantly to be humble. Within the church, I came to believe it was good and right to think little of myself, that I was lucky to be alive because of God, so I therefore owed a lifelong debt to Him, to put what was perceived as His demands and commands above all else. I was taught that to listen to my own thoughts or feelings was tantamount to disrespecting God. The idea that my own thoughts and feelings were valuable was very foreign to me. I believed that to think so would be to disappoint God and that it would make Him angry. Therefore, upon leaving my religion, I floated around not knowing what to think or believe because I'd never learned to lean upon my own understanding. That is actually a term I had heard from the Bible many times. A scripture in Proverbs says, "Trust in God with all your heart. Do not lean upon your own understanding." This was drilled into me regularly, dogmatically. So, yeah, not so much self-trust built into my upbringing. Now, all due respect to those that view the Bible as Bible, but for me, I began my journey out of the Jehovah's Witness religion by letting go of the Bible as my guide. I understand it is the end-all be-all for a large portion of society. I get that, and reverently urge those that view it as the unwavering Word of God to feel and believe as they wish. I am not knocking it or criticizing it. I have respect for Christian behavior when it is truly Christ-like. But my exit from this church began with letting go of everything I ever believed was true. The Bible was at the top of that list. I had to start from scratch, erase everything I had been brainwashed to believe since the day I was born. You would be amazed at the amount of dogma, rhetoric, and belief that is welded into our brains as we are developing as beings. Beliefs had carved pathways in my brain of automatic acceptance of not just doctrine and principles, but ethereal nuances of opinions and speculations that I had been surrounded by for decades. Letting go of these took awareness and vigilant attention. Dropping all that felt like an amputation of a huge part of me, and it felt like I was floating in space. I had no idea how to navigate this gravity-free, wild sensation. I did know sure as hell that I wanted to. I'd put myself through hell by choosing to do so. My thoughts were, no religion for me. No, sir, I'm done with all that shit. I knew what I didn't want, and I was sure there wasn't any need to replace my faith. But part of the floating in space feeling came from the idea that I had no future. My former faith had held out the carrot of eternal life and paradise. Now that was gone. Was I just to live a life of sin and be selfish and die like everybody else? Everybody else who wasn't a Jehovah's Witness? That sounds ridiculous now, but in truth, that's where my head was at. And to be frank, I didn't really care if that was my fate. I was so tired of listening to this church dictate my life, a church which to me was filled with double standards, hypocrisy, injustice, and heavy-handed judgments. I left that church not necessarily knowing it was wrong, but just knowing it was no longer right for me. So if I was going to die at Armageddon, so be it. I was going to do what I wanted, God damn it. Outside the church, the few people left in my life helped me to open my mind. Each one of them shared their beliefs or non-beliefs with me. I welcomed it all openly. I weeded with sharp skepticism. I watched the Bill Maher documentary, Religulous, which blew my shallow, uneducated mind. I watched Julia Sweeney's one-woman show, Letting Go of God. Wow. I read book after book on atheism, religion, and numerous philosophical, theoretical speculations. I didn't latch on to any of it. I allowed it to wash over me while I continued to peruse the possibilities. Intimidating as it was, I enjoyed this phase. For the first time ever, there were no rules. No longer being a JW meant a world of fun and interesting possibilities open for me. Not just in philosophical and spiritual venues, but in everything. I could watch or read whatever I wanted, and now do things once forbidden. I smoked a few cigarettes and a few bowls. I bought lottery tickets. I had sex outside of wedlock, just to name a few of my newly explored rebellious deeds. All these acts would have had me booted from the church had I not already made my escape. Not many of these racy, rule-breaking activities were even important to me, but it just felt so good to do whatever the hell I wanted to do for once. The pendulum swung pretty far from the tightly regimented life I was allowed in the church. So I'm hoping some of you guys out there can relate to some of those words. And I'm just going to go ahead and read the next chapter. It shows one of the things I was dabbling in. Okay, chapter 34. One of my new explorations changed everything for me. I didn't have many friends because I had lost every friend I had in the church. The church had taught me my whole life not to befriend the world. So the only non-JW friends I had were few and far between, albeit incredibly important. I was slowly putting myself out there to create a new social life at 46 years old. One of my daughter's good friends, Sarah, hung out at our house a lot. I got to know her mom, Anne, a little bit. One day she invited me to go to a class with her. I didn't really understand what kind of class it was. It sounded like a self-help thing or something. So I said I would love to go. I was pretty much game for anything at this point. It was a Monday night. Anne and I arrived in Laguna Hills and parked in front of a little bookstore called Awakenings. I was clueless as to what might have been inside. There were long, lanky, beautiful people coming out of the attached yoga room. When we entered the bookstore, a lovely aroma of sage and lavender drifted through the shop. The air was tufted with peaceful music, something with a sitar and flute. There were Siddhartha carvings, angel sculptures, crystals, chakra paintings, books. This would have been a place that, as a Jehovah's Witness, I would have never been in. The ultimate taboo. I was a little nervous because it was all so unfamiliar. But there was downright fear in me too. The Jehovah's Witnesses teach that anything in the metaphysical world is connected with the devil. They believe that to look at anything mystical, magical, anything about spirit, goddesses, fairies, meditation, etc., anything like that would be to invite Satan and his demons in your life. This is no hyperbole. As a child, there was so much fear in me about wicked spirits, demons, or Satan's minions. I was terrified of the whole subject. I was not allowed to watch Bewitched because it had a witch and was about magic. No Scooby-Doo, no Casper, friendly or not, he was a ghost. To explain the intense dread I had of anything spirit-related is so difficult for me to express because it seems so absurd and over the top. I still had this fear after becoming an adult. I would never watch a scary movie or paranormal subject matter. Once I got tricked into seeing Chucky, and it traumatized me for years. A talking doll really did me in. I was taught to stay away from anything that smacked of this flavor since I was a small child. So here I was in a metaphysical bookstore. Nervous, but it was quite pleasant in there. The music, the aroma, it calmed me. Everyone was so nice and welcoming. I was hungry for that. I missed my friends terribly. Then we entered the other room, which was where the yoga class had just been held. It was a softly lit room with a couch and a circle of chairs. It smelled lovely also. When everyone was seated, our teacher came in and greeted the room. She was a lovely, delicate, blonde woman named Barbara, wearing a glittering top, leggings, and flats. She prepared the room by spritzing something that smelled like rose water around the room. She laid a beautiful silk scarf in the middle of the floor in front of us. On it, she placed a large, white, chunky shard of selenite crystal, some pictures of angels, and one of Jesus, and a large, white, floaty feather. Uh-oh. What have I got myself into? When she sat down and addressed the class, she smiled warmly and welcomed everyone. She asked each of us to introduce ourselves and talk about the last time we had an intuitive experience. We took turns around the circle, and when it came to my turn, I just said, "My name is Jill. I don't know what I'm doing here or what this class is about, but I trusted my friend Anne here and just came along for the ride." Barbara smiled warmly and welcomed me. After introductions and some explanation from Barbara about what we would do that night, we took a few moments for a bathroom break and a drink of water before coming back into class for meditation. I had never in my life meditated. Again, meditation was a big no-no in the church. The church taught that if you relaxed your mind and emptied it like that, that anything could enter and that demons could and would influence you in this state. So I had no idea what this experience would be like. I listened carefully and followed directions, breathing deeply several times as we began. Barbara played a crystal bowl, which created a magical spinning, ringing sound that seemed to be swirling around the room. The sound felt like it was going through my body. She began to speak of chakras opening, describing each of them from the red root chakra to the orange sacral to the yellow solar plexus and on to the green heart chakra, the blue throat chakra, the indigo third eye chakra, and finally the violet crown chakra. She proceeded on a mystical adventure that was full of vivid images, symbols, and beauty. She spoke of resting on clouds with angels, of fields of flowers and butterflies and waterfalls. It was amazing. I was caught up in it completely. I surrendered to this experience fully. I felt like I had left my body and left the room, floating up and through space, feeling utter bliss and peace. When she brought us back from this trance, I felt so calm. Any trepidation I may have felt coming into the room that night was gone. Slowly the lights came up, and Barbara checked in to see that everyone was good. From the sound of the responses from the other people in the room, they were as blissed out as I was. She then told us that we would be reading oracle cards for each other. I had never heard of oracle cards, but I was pretty sure they were kind of like tarot cards. Oh boy, I was in deep now. I had never even seen a tarot card or oracle card, let alone having a reading done. Now, tonight, I'm going to receive a reading and I'm going to give a reading. Good thing I was in this blissful post-meditative state because I wasn't anxious or worried at all. I just went with it. What a fun night. I couldn't believe what I'd done, but I loved every minute of it. And right into chapter 35. That night, I excitedly told my husband and even my daughter what I had done and what the class was about. They were both shocked. My daughter was pleased as she had an interest in that sort of thing unbeknownst to me. The whole week, I was thinking about what the class would be like. I planned on going back the following Monday and I couldn't wait. When Monday came, I asked Anne if she would go back to class with me. She wasn't available, so I bravely drove up there by myself. I saw the yogis coming out of their class. I peered inside the window from my car. Suddenly, all the fear came back. I didn't want to go in. I was afraid to enter alone. I drove home and told myself that maybe I'd go next week if Anne was available to go. The following Monday came once again, and Anne said she couldn't make it. I wanted to go so bad. For some reason, it was all I'd been thinking about. I summoned my courage and told myself I was safe and I'll be fine going alone. The name of the class was actually called Sharpening Your Sixth Sense. As I pulled up to the store, I didn't see as many people around as usual, but I got out of my car and walked into the bookstore this time. I went to the front counter to ask the owner of the store if the Sixth Sense class would be held that night. He said wryly, "You tell me, are we having class tonight?" I laughed awkwardly and told him I was new. He laughed and smiled and said yes, the class was happening. I entered the room for the class and found a spot in the circle. There were different people there than the week before. Barbara came in as before and prepped the room. Meditation was even better this time. I felt such a sense of peace. The most powerful moment during the guided meditation that night was when Barbara was describing Mother Earth and our connection to her. How there is a love between us and Mother Earth. The meditation brought us to the core of Mother Earth. The powerful sense of love overwhelmed me. Tears streamed from my eyes, though I stayed in the trance through the whole meditation. Afterwards, I wiped my tears. I felt as if something in me had shifted. I felt comforted. I felt unconditional love. I felt a connection with something intangible. I was not afraid, not even a little. I was hooked. So there you have it. From the JW world into what is, very taboo according to their beliefs and everything. And I'm not going to talk too much about it because, you could just see I was exploring everything and it was great. Very fun. So I really hope you guys enjoyed today's chapters, and it's just been such a pleasure doing this. So please come back for the next one and have a lovely day.